Hello everyone, this is Carol Ann here with the Cuyahoga Falls Library. Welcome to our class, So Electric. Today I'm going to be showing you what comes in your kit as well as how to put it together. After registering for the class, you should have received an email about when and how to pick up your kit. You can stop into the library either by pulling up to the pickup window, or you can come into the building anytime that we're open. So feel free to use either of those methods to get these materials. The other thing to keep in mind is that we do offer a Zoom meeting on August 29th from 2 to 3 in case you have any questions or maybe you want to problem solve and troubleshoot something that's going on with your project. Maybe it's not quite functioning the way it's supposed to, or maybe you just want to show us the awesome thing that you made. Either way, we would love to see you, and that is August 29th from 2 to 3. So let's get started. These are the different things that you're going to find in your kit. We have our 2 pieces of fabric. These are just kind of a standard basic felt. It's super easy to sew and it should be a little simpler to use. The next thing we have are these 2 snaps. These are little metal snaps, and for our project today this is actually going to act like a little switch. So we'll work on that. The next thing we have is this conductive thread and this regular thread. So these 2 types are going to be used in this project in a couple of different ways. This one, the conductive thread, will be used only for the electronic components. It has the ability to allow electricity to pass through it and connect the different parts of our circuit. The other one is just a basic black sewing thread. That's for if you're wanting to connect the different pieces of fabric together, or maybe tacking something down to give it a little more structure or hold. We have our little sewing needle here. We also have our LED light. Before I put your kits together, I made sure to test every single one, so each of those are in working order. We also have our battery holder, and the battery holder holds our little coin cell battery right here. These are the different pieces that will come in a little baggie for you. Something that you might want to have on hand would be a pair of scissors or something sharp to be able to cut your thread ends or to cut your fabric in case you wanted to change the shape of it. To start off our project, we're going to take out our needle and our conductive thread. I gave you a good amount of conductive thread. This thread, you want to be careful with how you use it so that it doesn't kind of fray or snap and break. Because this thread is trying to conduct electricity or allow it to pass through it, we are going to want to double up our thread. For threading your needle, sometimes you have to cut off a little end so it's nice and even and it's a little easier. Sometimes you can wet the end and sort of smooth it out. That's if these little strands are frayed. But once you have a nice little fresh end, you can see about putting it through the eye of the needle there. This can be a little tricky, so you want to be patient and give yourself some time and good light. And you pull it through like that. You see how there's multiple strands in there. It's hard to see. But it's made up of all these little, basically super thin metal wires. Or like metal wrapped string. In order to conduct the electricity, we want to have like a double strand. So I match up the 2 ends and then kind of smooth out that yarn, or the string, excuse me, so that it's nice and even. And then I go ahead and tie the knot at the end. Sometimes I don't tie a knot, but that can be a little different. It's a little tricky with it being really squiggly, but just take some practice and kind of getting used to it. So there's a little knot there. So now that we have our needle threaded with our conductive thread, we're going to attach our battery holder to the smaller piece of fabric. You can attach it in other directions or you can change the shape of it, but this is just to kind of show you how these parts work. So we're going to be putting the battery holder onto the fabric, and then we will get another little snap to go next to it. So I'm going to be stitching this down here and then stitching a little line over to the side so that there's enough space for the fabric to reach down and snap. So I will show you that. We've got the knot at the end, and I like to go kind of back and forth, and I'll stick my needle through. I'm having it come through the hole there, and then I bring it through until the knot catches it. One of the things with this conductive thread is it likes to snag. So sometimes it's good to maybe hold a little tension, like support it, so that when you pull it through, it doesn't catch on itself. That tends to help. So now that's one stitch, kind of from the back to the front. And I'm going to do that 2 more times, just so it's good and secure. So for the conductivity, you want to make sure that, yeah, see where it's like kind of bunched up. I take and try and separate it a little bit. For the conductivity, you want a good connection, so you want the metal touching the metal so that it's getting the energy from the battery sent to the metal ends and sending it to the thread. So I'm going to do one more stitch. And that's one side. So now I'm going to start moving a little line of stitches out to the side here to attach our snap. Just go a little ways over and then pull it through. A little ways over and then pull it through. You just kind of keep going. Then once you're out to the side like this, we're going to start attaching our little snap. And you want to make sure that you're using the one that is just the little nubbin. Let's see. So this one has like this little spring here, but then this is the little nubbin. And on the card, it's the one that's on the back. So we're going to use the back of that snap. So that's here. And just like we did the battery holder, kind of go from the back and run it through. And I'm going to do a couple on each of these openings so that it's a good strong connection. You see how, like, if I just did one, it would be flapping around. So I will do a couple stitches. And then I move over to the next one. And see how sometimes it gets tangled. So I just kind of find the loop and let it unwind a bit. And if you're finding that's happening a lot, sometimes it's because the thread needs to like unspin. So let the needle hang, and that helps if you let it unspin a bit. The next one. So now that I have a couple of stitches on each opening, I can go ahead and tie off in the back. Sometimes I'll do like a little, just grab a little piece of the fabric, or I'll go into like one of these other stitches and I will tie off by going through that and then going through this loop that I made. And that sort of knots it in place. And I'll do that a couple of times just so it's good and secure. And then we can cut our ends. And that's our first bit of sewing. And now we're going to do the same thing on the other side. The big thing about doing the other side is that you want them to be separate pieces of the thread. You don't want these to connect because we want the connection to be through the battery. If the string was all the way through, it would just loop that circuit and then the energy from the battery wouldn't go anywhere because it just completes it. So we want to make sure that everything's separate. So that's going to be a separate thread going over to here. want to make sure that you're using the right type earth side of the snap so that it matches once we go to put on the other half. You'll notice that this bottom part can flap around. For this one, you can actually use some of the regular thread because it's not having to connect to anything else that's electronic, and that way it doesn't interfere. So we will go on to the next. Now that I have my needle threaded with the regular thread, I'm going to go ahead and stitch these down. So just like we stitched with the conductive thread, I'm just going to go around a couple of times. And because this is not conductive or electrical thread, I can actually stay attached and connect the other side. And it won't matter because this isn't going to conduct anything. Doing my little knot trick. And there we go. You just want to make sure you never connect both sides with the conductive thread because that will short circuit your circuit. So only with the regular thread. Here we go. The next step that I'm going to do is to attach our bit of sewing here over to our bigger piece of fabric, just so it's easier to line up, because we're going to fold it down and sew our little light so it snaps down here. One of the things that I like to do is I like to hide my knots and ends. So I'll actually go from the underside of this to hide that knot in place. And then I'll line it up here. Now this stitching, because it's not with a conductive thread and it's not for any like electronic purpose, I'm going to show like a couple of different types of stitches. So there's like this one that's a whip stitch, and it goes in through one side and then wrapped around the edge. A lot of times people call this like blanket binding or your whip stitch, or just kind of a basic stitch. So you don't have to think about where it is coming in and out. Whereas our other stitch, like this one, is just a regular old straight stitch. And you don't have to do this stitch, you can try other ones. It's entirely up to you. So those are some different, that's our little whip stitch. Try and keep it pretty even. You can make it different shapes and things. So I will do kind of our standard stitch along the bottom. And for this one, I'll actually do a couple in and out. So you see how I've got a couple stitches on there? Then I can pull it through. Then you've got a couple of stitches at the same time. And I just am practicing different types of stitches just because they look a little different and it's good to practice. You just want to be careful about where you have your fingers so you don't poke yourself. And if you have like it's really stiff, that's where those thimbles come in handy. But take your time, be careful. And then I'll probably do some more whip stitching on the side. Now the tricky part for tying off on this end, because I'm trying to hide it, I will do the same kind of knot like I've been doing. And then I'll go right inside and kind of come out further down. And then I'll cut really close. You can hold it in. So now you don't have like the tail sticking out, and it's a little closer. It kind of puts it on the inside. So that is attaching the fabric. Now that we've sewn these two pieces together, we're going to start attaching our little star. So this is our light, and I'm going to flip this down so that it snaps here and we put our light here. The biggest thing to kind of take notice of is that the star has this little plus sign here and this little minus sign. So this is our positive side and this is our negative side. And you have to match your positive with your positive side of your battery holder. So for this one, I would have to turn it around so that this snap goes to the positive side and this snap goes to the negative side. So when I have it here, I have to arrange it like this so that they match polarity. So now that we know which direction we need our light, I'm going to do the same sewing with our conductive thread going in from the back. And for this, sometimes I go through the little hole here. but you can also go around the sides. It's entirely up to you. So I have nice 3 little stitches there. So I'm going to take my stitching and go across. Nope. I went around. But that's okay. I can just kind of run the needle back through. So that can happen, even to the best of us. Now I want to match the snaps. So this snap, I might attach and this one, because it's flipping down, I have to think about that that's the side that is going to touch it. So I'm going to go from the spring side. So the spring should be against your fabric. So I'm going to thread that onto there. And then make sure it lines up. I'm going to give it a little loose stitch. And that lines up pretty good. So I'm going to hold it there. And you can decide to sew your snaps and your lights on the same side or shift around. You just got to think about how they're going to match up and then connect. And make sure that you're using the conductive thread. And you can see that that's going to be kind of like my front. So I might do some sort of a little bit of decorative stitching where it doesn't really make a difference because it's not holding anything. But if you do just a little bit, there's enough. I might hold off and do the decorative stuff after I've sewed it with the both connections, but that's an idea that you can use to make your stitching kind of look pretty. So I'm just going to tie it off here. So now that snaps. And you see there might be some pull, so I might reinforce that with some regular thread so it's a little stronger. Now that I have the one side attached, I'm going to go ahead and attach the other snap. So again, paying attention to using the correct side so that spring wants to be against the fabric. Kind of matching things up. And there's like different ways to line up and sew snaps and things. This is just how I'm choosing to do it today. If you have a way that works really well and you want to share, definitely let us know during that Zoom meeting that we're having on August 29th. That would be great to hear. Now that I have both the positive and the negative snaps sewn on, I am not going to cut off just yet in case I need to troubleshoot this side. And we will open up our battery and test it to see if it works. So the positive side for your battery is this flat, shiny side, and then that goes up. So we want to match the positive with the positive, just like that. And you slide it in. And then how this should work is that as soon as I snap these together, it will make the loop and connect the positive over to the negative, giving power to the light. So let's see. We'll snap the positive and then the negative. Oh no. So that is not lighting up. Sometimes you have to play with the battery. Oh. Oh. So what do you think happened? When it's touching, it doesn't work. But when it's open, it does. And it's because that negative side over here is touching onto the positive side of the battery holder. But when it's not, it's holding it. So one thing that we can do is to put the battery on the inside or put the light somewhere else and run our snaps down. Maybe we'll put the light on this side and then it might not interfere so much. Sometimes it's the connection. But some of these things are kind of trial and error, right? So I'm actually going to take this apart and maybe sew it from the other side. Or maybe I'll just leave it like this and show what happens when you connect it in a different way. So I'd love to see how you solve this problem. What do you do to fix how it works? What's your answer? What's your answer? Now that I've taken all of that back apart, I am seeing how that positive is here and then the positive's here. So I'm going to move my star over here so the stitching for the positive doesn't touch anything except for the positive. You could have put like a piece of fabric there or something else, but I just wanted to show you that sometimes it's okay to take something all back apart because it just didn't work. So that's totally fine. So I'm stitching my little star back on. It's not nice. And because my little snap doesn't have to go very far, I can just sort of thread it through. And see how far over it needs to be. See how I'm kind of matching it up. This time I'm paying a little closer attention to how it looks on the front. So now I have like these little sparkles. And that attaches. So that's my negative to my negative. So I'm going to tie this off. And cut that. And go to the next side. So I've got the negative side sewn, and we're going to sew down our little positive side. So I'm going to run through the back to the front. Now, I gave you a good amount of both types of thread, but if you're running into problems like this, or maybe it's snarled like crazy, you can always let us know during that Zoom meeting if you're running into problems, and we can see what kind of solutions we can come up together. If it's just a matter of needing more thread or anything like that, then we can see what we can do. So now the only thing that will touch that positive side of the battery holder is the positive threads. So then it doesn't matter. See, actually completes the circuit before I even put the snap on. And for this solution, or this option, that is okay. You can devise some other solutions. Maybe you go around the battery holder or something like that. So again, I'm going to go through my snap. And match it up. And stitch it down. And because this solution didn't matter about how much the snap is connecting, I don't have to worry as much about how much it's connecting, but depending on what kind of solution you come up with, you might need to be using the conductive thread the whole time. Okay. And typically I would take the battery out while I'm sewing things just so it doesn't run it low, but it was good to see that those were working. And now it's a little bit stronger. There might be some connections. You see how it's a little weak? Some of those connections might be a little loose. You can either use more conductive thread to stitch down more, or you can use like some other thread to kind of hold things. But you can test where the connections are loose by touching different areas, or trying to use like a piece of metal to kind of touch the parts that you know should pass the energy. So like a piece of aluminum foil or something, you can see if your battery is working or if your lights, like where the connection's loose. Like if it's between the negative to the battery or between the positive to the battery. So those are different things to test. So you can see how we started with one thing and changed it, and now that I have it working in a little better condition, I'm probably gonna do a little decoration. I'll show you what I come up with. Okay, so now that I have used the extra thread, I went ahead and made like this fun little design. You can see the back. It's a little bit messy, but it's still fun. We've got our little working light. It still has some weak connections, so I could probably play with that more, but I wanted to show how you could use the thread to do kind of different things and have fun with it. And now you can see how buggy your project can be, but that it might just take some playing with it to get it to really work. So there you go. I would love to see what kind of things you come up with if you want to cut shapes out or do some other position, but hopefully this gives you some knowledge on how to create your circuit by matching the positive side of the battery with the positive side of your light and connecting it to the negative side on both pieces as well. So hopefully you have fun with this project, and we will see you possibly on our Zoom meeting or in another one of our programs. All right, happy making!